friends, foes, and otherwise fans, you're welcome. You're welcome for another episode of Beyond Ag Ed. And this morning, well, it's always morning for us based on when we record, but who knows? This could be middle of the night for you and you're trying to fall asleep, and we're going to be what fills your sweet dreams. So, either way, welcome back. But we were just chatting about the time of year that we're in, which is chaos, cuckoo, crazy season for ag teachers. And something you said, Corey, reminded me of a reel. I think it was a reel. Maybe it was a meme that someone posted on their page this week. But it was basically this chick sitting at her desk and she's like lighting a candle. And then the caption was, nobody, right? And then it's blank, or everybody. Maybe it's everybody. I don't know. Either way. So it's blank. And then it's this girl, and her caption is, I burnt, so I'm an ag teacher. I burnt the candle at one end, then I burnt the other end. Then I found the magical third layer, burnt that candle, found another candle, and I lit that shit too. That's how life's going right now. And so I think that's a great introduction for what we wanted to chat about during this episode, which is, as you mentioned, that kind of juggling act. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like, and then we'll dive into kind of how to identify maybe triggers or markers that you're about to head into a juggling season. Maybe if we identify those in advance, we could prepare ourselves when you're in it, what to do. And then when all those freaking balls drop, like, how do you pick them back up and move forward?
So I was talking to Colleen before we jumped on here and started recording. With my current job, I feel like I'm taking on a lot at all times, right? And as you learn more, you begin to be able to kind of do some of those things. I don't want to use the word autopilot, but you're able to do them more effectively without having to put forth as much effort into them. But one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of when I was an ag teacher was being spread too thin. What I mean by that is I remember telling somebody my first year as an ag teacher, like, it feels like I'm standing on one leg juggling and just keep shit in the air, and people are throwing you more shit to juggle, right? And at some point there's only so much that you can juggle, and to be fair, some can juggle more than others. I would say I need to be able to focus on probably two or three things max. Some people can do five, six things. Like, it just kind of depends on the person. But regardless, if people keep throwing you things or you're allowing them to throw you things, at some point, everything's going to drop. And that's a crash for you. Like, that's kind of a hypothetical rock bottom. And at that point, you have to decide what things are worth picking up before you start juggling again. Um, so a good example for a new ag teacher, right? You're just new into the profession. You've been assigned your classes. It's your first year. As we've talked before, classroom being the most important thing. And I believe that's a non-negotiable, to be honest.
Yep.
You should be focused on putting forth a good lesson plan, like staying, like Gillis said last week on the show, a step ahead of the students or a chapter ahead of the students, whatever that requires for you. You need to be able to deliver and execute a good lesson. The other thing would probably be, being able to be a part of your department's participation within, like, the FFA side of things or the SAE side of things, going back to the three-ring circle, being able to do one of those things really well. And just juggle that, right? Focus on those things. Now, fast forward 5 years, if you make it that far, because we know that's an issue and that's why we're here. 5 years down the road, your lesson plans are probably going to be pretty damn dialed in, right? If you've put forth an effort into them, like, you won't have to tweak them as much. You won't have to focus as much energy there. Now you can focus some energy into some other things, right? So the point is, as you're juggling, people are going to keep throwing you shit just to see how much you can juggle and handle. And once everything drops, then at that moment you need to figure out, okay, what's worth continuing to pick up and be good at, and how do I move forward from this? And then as you move forward, what can you allow to kind of go, and then what do you want to keep juggling?
Yeah. When you're talking about that, I'm picturing a few things, how I how I used to juggle when I was in the classroom, what juggling looks like now, which is just different. You and I are in a very different place than most of the people watching this channel. And a few things. I agree. I think some people are naturally more inclined or better equipped to juggle more right off the bat. Whatever their baseline is, there's some people that are just going to have more of a capacity for that than others naturally. Secondly, I think it also depends what season of life that you're in. That can also impact your capacity to juggle more or do more. For me, it came down to just the realization of that because I can sometimes doesn't mean I need to or that I should. Because for me, what winds up happening is the more that I'm juggling, the majority of those things are getting done. What's the extent to which I'm completing them? What amount of excellence am I bringing to the table as I'm completing those tasks? And then you keep in mind like the ones that are that are dropping. How about instead of dropping a ball because we're juggling too much, pass it off to somebody else? And not because you can't, not because you're not working hard enough or as hard as anybody else in your program if you're in a multi-person department, but instead of doing something half-ass, instead of letting a ball drop, being empowered to like share that with somebody else. I think that's an important piece. Um, one of my friends said something that stood out to me this week, and it was something I'm paraphrasing, it was something to the effect of, I don't need to do more things. I need to do fewer things with greater excellence. And that's it. And I was sharing with you before we pressed record on this bad boy here. Realization has come to me, an epiphany, if you will, over the last few weeks, that I am not meant to be, and sorry to my friends that are going to see this at some point, I'm not meant to be a PTA mom. Not meant for me. It just isn't. And because I've got enough going on, I don't need, I'm not looking for something to be an ego booster or another jewel in my crown, because we're glitz and glamour and anyway, right? Not looking for that. And I think part of me felt like months ago when I kind of sort of got myself voluntold into something, I felt like it would mean something if I said no, that like, oh, I have this time freedom now. I'm my own boss. I can say yes to all these things. I didn't leave the 9 to 5 so that I could turn into like PTA mom of the year and be like president of the board necessarily. I left the 9 to 5 to explore this passion and build this business and, earn an income through impact while also being able to say yes to the stuff that my kids want me to show up at, right? They want me to come to parent picnic day. They could give two shits if I'm the one behind the scenes planning the whole fundraiser for everybody else. You know what I mean? So I think we also have to be just mindful of what's your capacity. Like Corey's capacity is going to be totally different than mine. Not better, not worse, but different. Right. And I think being aware of your own capacity, the season of life that you're in, all of a sudden, then you can be more decisive. And when opportunities like cross your path, you can say yes or no and it not be a thing. Right.
I think there's like, to your point, the programs, the departments that are most successful, especially the larger ones, because the smaller ones are just limited as to how much they can do. And if they're trying to do too much, then that goes right hand in hand with exactly what we're saying here. But part of what you're explaining is that the best programs, the best departments, in my opinion, they are able to capitalize on people's skill sets.
Yep.
So at Madera, like Corey's job was to be good at power mechanics, coach a successful farm power or small engines team, whatever it was that I chose,
Sure.
and then be in charge of dairy heifers. And I've talked about this before. I hated dairy heifers. So that wasn't necessarily maximizing my skill set, but I don't think I would have been any more, I wouldn't have enjoyed doing hogs or sheep or anything more. Like it just, I didn't want to be a part of that part. That was just my personal preference though. but you had all these people in certain places in different classes with different curriculum that were great at what they did. Darlene Gillis was a fucking stud in the floral shop, right? The floral boss. That's
Yeah,
what she did
easy.
well. Like Julie Luxon is a record book queen. Like she's top notch. She
Yeah.
does that. She taught civics and econ extremely well. She taught the leadership classes extremely well. Like you let her do what she's great at. And if everybody is doing what they're great at, then your department starts to rise above any expectations. And, going way back into the history of Madeira, like I brought up to Darlene the other day, between her and the other guys that she taught with, they were legends.
Yeah.
They got that community to buy into what they were selling, and it's because everybody had a job and they were good at what they were doing. They were great at what they were doing. It was their job to be great at what they were doing,
Mhm.
capitalizing on people's skill sets instead of like, well, Corey, I need you to teach floral. Like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not going to get anything done. This is going to be the worst class ever. I'll try.
Yeah.
I'll try, but I'm not gonna fall in love with this. Like flowers just isn't my shit. I have a hard enough trying to keep my grass alive. Like I I can't do it, or I don't want to do it. More importantly, so being able to capitalize on people's skill sets and then allow them to be able to focus on that by not feeding them too much. I think that there is a stigma with new teachers. It's like, all right, well, I got initiated this way, so let's see how much this fool can handle. And it's like, okay, so you're gonna be in charge of this, you're gonna be in charge of that. Are we really gaining anything, or are we running them off? Like, think about it for a second. Maybe you could be a mentor, be like, hey, dude, look, I need you to be good at these two things. Focus. We talked about this earlier, the mentorship piece, right?
Yes.
Focus. I need you to do good in your classroom, and I need you to do good right here. Like, you're
And
not going
for
to be a
me,
FFA advisor. Go
that's
ahead.
the that is the baffling part of all of this. And as someone who had a less than ideal childhood in many regards, my point is this. Just because something was shitty before, just because we had to go through something hard, like really freaking hard, and we proved ourselves and it was possible and we made it through, just because it's possible for some people to grin and bear through it and make it happen, doesn't mean there is not a better way that we could implement right now to be more effective, more efficient, and actually grow a profession. So for me, it's like, do you want to be right? Do you want to have your moment in the sun where you get to say, see, now it's your turn? Do you want it to be someone else's turn to go through unnecessary BS? Or do we want it to be all of our turn to rise the tides for an entire profession? That's like, that's my thing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'm all about people needing to like, I get you've got to earn your stripes a little bit. You need to be aware of legacies and history that happened before you, people that paved the way before you've gotten to the point and the place that you're at. At the same time, when we know better, we do better. That's what I feel like people need to realize, that that's what this profession's being called to do right now. It is 2024. We've got the data. We know how long people are staying in the profession. We know the majority, right, are female. We know like the year that people drop off, and we have this insane attrition rate. We know all the things. We've had the answer for a long time, but there's still too many people that are used to how it's always been. And we are scared to admit the parts of ourselves that aren't as effective as they could be, that aren't as aligned as they could be. And we're afraid of actually trying to do things just a teensy tiny little bit different. I'm not saying burn the place down and like redo the structure. I'm just saying, man, if we know this, if we have this information, how much easier would it be to just like shift the mindset a little bit, right, and come at it from a different approach? I think in a very short period of time you would see real like exponential growth in the educators that are in the profession now, and you would see an entire like culture shift statewide. But that's just my personal opinion. Sorry.
There's a leader. No, you're good. There's a leadership component to that as well, though, and that is to be able to mentor, like, or and not to we can go way off topic with this, but as a mentor, it's not about just being known as a mentor. It's about actually being a good mentor, right? I mean, I'm rereading, I'd read it before, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, who were Navy SEALs, right? And so they help these companies figure out their holes and are able to capitalize on them and make them more profitable, make people, whether it's turnover rates or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
You could relate it to ag education as a like CATA type thing. Like, why is the attrition rate so fucked up? Like, how do we keep younger ag teachers in this? Jocko could figure that out, right? Okay, so you go to this leadership component, and there's some accountability in the fact that if you have a new teacher come into your program or your department, and you have an opportunity to help them, want to feel like a part of the team, throwing a bunch of shit at them is not going to do that. And again, some people can juggle more than others, but you know, they're going to want to already try to prove themselves, right? They're already going to want to try and earn their keep. If you burn them out in the first year, then are you really doing them a service? Are you really doing the organization and the profession a service? Probably not. So an example of this was be like, I'm a service manager, right? My job is to make sure that customers' equipment gets fixed and it gets billed, and we bill as much of that as we can and make sure that we're taking care of our customers. If I get a brand new tech out of college who knows a little bit, and I put him on some of the harder equipment, like, hey, dude, this thing's got a gnarly electrical issue, you need to figure it out. I mean, if he's able to figure it out, fucking more power to him. That's awesome. But is that really setting him up for success?
Right.
Because in his mind, if he's not able to figure that out, which most people wouldn't be able to figure it out, they're gonna, at the end of it, he's gonna be like, everything is gonna be this hard. I don't think this is for me. Like, this is what the expectation is for me right out of the gate. I'll never make it. And you just destroyed their confidence. You
Yeah.
just destroyed every bit of the drive that they had and the ambition. Instead of like, hey, dude, I need you to inspect this tractor. It just showed up. It hasn't been gone through yet. Just make sure everything looks good. It's ready to sell. Okay, cool. I can do that. Right. And enough of those type things. Now they start to learn. By year 3, year 4, year 5, that person is much more capable, much more understanding. Again, they're not trying to juggle as much. There's less things that they're having to juggle, like trying to just make sure that they're putting good lessons together and teaching their students and making sure their classroom environment's dialed in. Like, just being able to manage that and be a true mentor, a true leader, and be able to support that young person instead of, um, screw up the, I don't know what I'm trying to say. You get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and while you were talking, I wrote down, I said, are you developing your skills? So in the midst of this conversation of you come in as a new teacher to the profession, right? Focus needs to be on the classroom, number one, and maybe whatever one or two responsibilities you're going to have as a full-fledged member of your department, right? Great. So year starts, everything starts happening, right? You're getting requests from admin. Maybe there's like a statewide event and they need some kids to show up at, whatever. The schedule starts to fill up, as we know, really quickly. Responsibilities change, obligations start piling on. As a young teacher, you also can't rely on whether or not your mentor or your department chair or whoever it is that you're working with and that's guiding you, you can't just rely on their ability to do what you just said, which is set you up for success, right? You also have to be actively, in my opinion, in a state of constantly developing your skills. What are you doing? So if you were small engines, right? If you're a small engines coach, what are you doing? Even if I'm assuming there's some natural ability or know-how or background there, but what are you actually doing to develop your skill set in that area? What are you continuing to hone as an FFA advisor in terms of preparing your students and helping them be able to complete AET without without paying someone like a Julie, right? You know, and not that anyone's doing that. I'm just saying, like, if you had someone like her to come in as a consultant and fix your shit, like everyone would be down to do that. You know what I'm saying? She's got like the magic voodoo touch. Um, you've got to be developing your skills, right? So we're not just saying that you're catching obligations and passing them off, or you're juggling all those balls in the air until you drop everything and basically implode. If you want to avoid that, if you want to prolong the amount of time that you're able to be in somewhat of a state of balance, you've got to be working on your shit. You've got to be developing, right, your personal skills and abilities. And sometimes that's going to be content based with like AET record books, you know, whatever CDEs you're coaching. It's also you as a human being. What personal development are you doing? What do your, as we've talked about a million times before, what do your personal routines and habits look like? How are you actually taking care of yourself? What are you putting in your freaking body? Like, all of these things matter no matter what profession you're in, but especially for our ag educators, like, holy cheese balls. I mean, you've got to be developing yourself and working on yourself in the middle of this whole process, like, come together.
Well, that's how it correlates with life too, right? The whole thing we're talking about of trying to juggle all this shit and be good at so many things at once. I think that's the misconception, and we'll just tie this into the personal development side like we always do. That's the problem with people getting started on their fitness journey. They're like, oh, well, come Monday, like when they finally make a half-assed decision in their head, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to start working out 7 days a week, and I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to start praying, and I'm going to start taking cold showers. And it's like, you really think you can take all that on at once? Like, I know I've done this before too. And the reason that's why I'm so familiar with it. And like, come
Correct.
Monday, I'm gonna start all this shit. It's not sustainable, dude. It's not. Pick one thing and just be good at it. Put intention into it. Like, okay, I want to get into shape. I'm gonna start working out. I'm gonna work out 4 days a week. And I don't have a program. You know what? So I'm gonna hit up Corey or Colleen, and they're gonna help me with a program,
Mhm.
right? Or whatever that looks like. You can fucking Google one if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's not gonna give me my best bang for my buck and get me jacked by the end of the week. Yeah, no shit. I can't do that either. So the
Sleep.
point I'm trying to make is pick one thing and just get a
Mhm.
sound game plan with it. And again, this is something I struggle with still, and then execute. Do it. If you're going to work out Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, then do it. Just show up, get the work in. It's going to
Yeah.
suck,
Mhm.
but after a couple months of that, like, oh, it takes 30 days to develop a habit. That's bullshit. It takes a lot longer than that, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And I had this question for one of my clients the other day, the gentleman that I'm working with. I said, if you could give advice to one person, like that, they're like, how did you lose 20 pounds in the last 3 months? How are you looking so jacked? What advice would you give them? And he's like, the most difficult thing is just developing that consistency for yourself, the discipline to just do it. If you're going to go to the gym at 4:30, just getting up and doing it even when you don't want to. That's the point, right? Is just, if you said you're going to do this, this is your game plan, just do it. And now you're not juggling everything at once. You're juggling one thing. And
Yeah.
anybody, I mean, do you think a professional juggler fucking started out with 5 chainsaws? No, no. Probably were juggling 2 tennis balls, and then they did three, and then they did four, and now all of a sudden, you know what I mean? They're a master of their craft.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this. It's the same thing with the personal development. It's the same thing with the professional development. Focus on the things that you can do and do them with intention. And then as you move down the road, you can start focusing on some of the things where you're a little bit weaker or
Yeah.
more interested. And an example of
You
this, and
can
this is what I
scale it.
was, what's that?
You can scale it, right?
You
Like, once
can.
you've got your foundation, then you can add things, but it's doing this first, the most important part. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like having a first year teacher come in. It's like, okay, so I know you've never taught uh, small engines before, but you're going to teach 4 periods of small engines. And I know you're an animal science major because most of you are, but you're going to teach small engines and 4 periods of that, and then 1 period of biology. And then you're also going to be in charge of sheep. I know you were a hog kid growing up, but you're going to be in charge of lambs. And then, oh, by the way, nobody wants to be FFA advisor. So guess what? You're the new person. You're it.
Mhm.
So did you just set that person up for success, or did you just basically make them want to tell you to fuck off?
Mhm.
Think about it. Like, is that the best way to handle the situation? Like, nobody else wants to do these things. So you're low man on the totem pole, screw you. Or, like, dude, this kid was a hog kid growing up, so he knows hogs pretty good. Uh, he's an animal science kid, so he can teach our vet science class. So he could do a good job there. And, we don't need to put him in an FFA advisor role right now because we don't want to throw too much at him. Now you're setting him or her up for success instead of freaking screwing them up and deterring them from the profession, right? So focusing, allowing them to focus on what they're good at and pick one or two things, and you managing that. Because sometimes you got to slow them down. Sometimes it's the other way, right?
And and if you want, yes. Oh my God, that is one of the hardest things for me because once I decide something, I want like the whole big freaking picture today, right now. I want to see it in my bank account. I want to see it in all the things, right? Like
Yep.
as soon as I'm ready to go, like that's it. There's no more question. Um, it doesn't, we know it doesn't work that way. But I think what you just said is so important because in this profession, the few times that I've ever heard this type of conversation take place, it'll get spun as, um, well, like it's not fair, or we can't make it that easy on them because it's not going to be easy all the time. It's not about it being easy. It's about you as a department, you as a mentor, you as whoever it is that's there at the table before these new professionals come in, you as that person who already has a seat caring more about growing the profession, caring more about continuing this legacy than about it being exactly the way that it was for you. And if we want people to stay, if we want them to have a fulfilling, passion filled, exciting, energized career in this profession, then let them have a little bit of success in the beginning, right? The people that I work with that have been the most successful, that are still like doing the things, rocking and rolling, like they're vibing at a very high level, is because I set them up for success in the very beginning. Like you said, we didn't sign up for a friggin' marathon day one of working together. I'm not even going to sign up for a marathon. That does not sound pleasurable to me. Okay. No,
What
thank
about
you.
a Spartan race?
Now I can
Do
be
it.
like, I can
Do
get
it.
more excited about that. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to lift something anyway. But I set them up with a plan where within their first like 3 to 5 days, they're succeeding at something. And it might look really small on paper, but what it does in the brain is retrain your mindset to say, huh, I do the things I say I'm going to do. It feels hard in the beginning. I do it anyway. And now I've learned how to go through that process. So moving forward as an ag teacher, right? Having something in the beginning that they align with, having something in the beginning they're a little bit excited about. Maybe it's that vet science class that you mentioned, right? Letting them have something that they're excelling at, it'll help their brain accept the fact that as you said, it's not always going to be that way. Um, but you're priming them to be able to learn and develop through the process. Whereas if we dump them into whatever shithole leftovers we're saying they get, also, what does that tell somebody when they're coming to your table, they're coming to your department, you're like, oh, nobody wants to do this, that, and the other. That's why it's your job. Going into that, am I going to be excited about it? Am I going to feel like, oh, I'm about to make an impact on kids? Am I going to feel like, oh, this is going to be freaking awesome and I can totally do this? No, you're going to head into it thinking, oh my God, this is going to be freaking awful because these other 4 people that I just got hired to work with, none of them want to do it. And I think they're amazing. And they've been in the profession 5, 10, 15 years. And if they don't want to do it or they can't handle doing it, How am I going to do it? I just got here. Mind
It's a
boggling.
novel concept, right?
Yeah.
But that was, and I was very fortunate looking back, like at Central High School, I started mid-year, and the people that I worked with, they're all incredible people, but they only gave me what they knew that I could focus on and be good at, right? They weren't throwing a bunch of shit at me. And I remember Chris Williams, who I think very highly of to this day, telling me, you know, this first semester, we're just trying to help you get through, right? And just be able to do what you do well. Next year, the expectation is going to rise and we're going to have you involved in some more things, which I totally was cool with. And I appreciated him being honest with me about that because, you know, obviously that's the goal is to help move somebody along, right? But he didn't want to discourage me from like, is this really what I signed up for? Or did I not want to stay here? Now I ended up leaving to go to Madeira anyways, because in my opinion at that time it was a better fit for me, and it ended up being that. But it wasn't because they overloaded me. It wasn't because I was pissed off at them there. I left because it was a move for me, a step forward.
Mhm.
Right. And then I get to Madeira and it was the same thing, to Madeira's credit and that department's credit and the people there, like they didn't throw a bunch of shit at me that I wasn't ready for, that I wasn't familiar with. Yeah, dairy heifers wasn't something that I was super familiar with, but it wasn't like, hey, we need you to win, showmanship at all these fairs and be able to perform a great top line. Like they helped me with that kind of stuff because I didn't know how to do it. And so it was just having that support and not just being like, well, you're the new guy, so you get all the shit stuff that nobody else wants. That I really appreciated that. And so, having had that good experience for myself allows me to kind of articulate to others watching this, you know, is that the experience that you're giving to younger ag teachers? And as you younger ag teachers, is that the experience that you're getting coming into this profession? Because if it's not, maybe that, and Hughes talked about this, Courtney talked about this, it just might not be a good fit in that department for you. And that's okay. You have to figure that out, but don't let that discourage you from continuing on in the profession, right? That not every department is like that. I had great experiences. Not everybody else did. And so, just being mindful of that, understanding that there's other opportunities, and not everybody is going to not mentor you and not lead you. They're not going to set you up for failure. Some people actually want to see you succeed.
Oh, for sure. And to that end too, gosh, I mean, I was a little bit kind of landlocked coming into the profession. I'd been working in the industry for about 4 or 5 years. I started during college and then it continued after. And so by the time I went back for my credential, I was not, maybe it was a little sassy, but I was not going to go just anywhere student teaching wise, like financially. It didn't make sense to me. And I didn't have the ability to do that. So we were either going to find a way for me to student teach within a drivable distance of where I was, or it wasn't going to happen and I'd wind up doing something else. All that to say, I don't know that I would have wound up anywhere different anyway, but I do wish I could have had the mindset I have now back when I was first starting, which is it is so much more important that you be aligned with the program or programs that you wind up working with during your career. Find places where you can excel. Find places where you are aligned with and support and can work parallel in conjunction with other people. If you find yourself in a place where it's just like a constant struggle, a battle, a fight, you're miserable when you're going to work, it doesn't necessarily mean you or the other people are bad people. You just might not be the right mix. You might not have the same vision or mission or values or goals, or the way you want to work towards achieving those could be totally night and day different. That's not wrong. It's also not going to set any of you up to be successful or really fulfilled during the process. So instead of fighting it, be open to, man, 20 minute longer drive, and you might find like your paradise version of a teaching placement. So I wanted to say that part. There was something else that I was going to share too, and now it's starting to evade me, but that happens to me sometimes when I get too excited about this stuff.
That's why we call it brain stew.
I know it is. We're like stirring it, we're heating it up, and then we send it out for everybody else to get a taste, right? But yeah, maybe just to kind of bring this thing full circle, do you have any input or ideas on, do you notice now when you're like, can you feel yourself before you go into like a juggling season? Do you know when you're starting to kind of inch towards that? Or do you blink and you're like, oh, holy shit, I did it again. I'm like overwhelmed and overloaded.
There's a part of me that looks forward to it, and then there's a part of me that's hesitant to go into it because I know it's going to be hard. And part of that is, I think, just a mental thing for me. It's more of a, it's there's a satisfaction in knowing that you're busy, and we had a whole episode on this. Um, Satisfaction in knowing that you're busy, but not necessarily being productive.
Yeah.
So that whole type of situation. But um, some advice I would say is, again, just focus on what you're good at, and try to find your fit. One thing I was going to add earlier is, and I just seemed to notice this towards the end of my teaching career, but there was a group of student teachers coming out that they thought they had it all figured out
Mm.
already. And so their abrasive personalities and mentalities coming into a program, even as student teachers, was counterproductive for them. It definitely put them in a difficult situation. Like, maybe you would be better in a one person department because you can do things your way,
Mm.
but in an 8-person department, you're probably not going to be a good fit. So finding your fit and finding how your personality is, because sometimes your personality is going to come on too strong. People are going to, a good leader is going to show you how to simmer down. And then other people, they need that um, guidance. They need that inspiration. They need to be led and mentored and pulled along.
Yeah.
For you experienced teachers, be that. Be able to identify what you're working with, especially with a younger teacher, and help them along, and try to be as honest as possible with them. Like, hey, you're probably going to be good at this thing, but I'm not sure if that's going to be here for you. Your personality and the personality of this department are a little bit different, and that's okay. Maybe if you want to adapt to this, that's fine, but uh, there's other opportunities out there. And that sounds like a dickhead way to say it, but it really is just being honest.
Yeah.
Because it's like firing somebody, right? If you have to fire somebody, nobody wants to have to do that. That sucks, right? Like, this is somebody's livelihood, but it's like, are you doing them a service if they are underperforming in your location?
Mhm.
Not really. Like, oh, well, we just need to hang on to him because there's a teacher shortage. Not anymore. So now, instead of putting warm bodies in seats, you should be looking for high performers, and you experienced teachers should be looking to lead them, and not just have the title mentor, but actually be a fucking mentor and guide them. Show them the ropes. Don't throw them all the shit projects. Like, be an actual influence in their life. For you young teachers, two things. Number one, if you're a hardhead, shut up and listen. Let them lead you. Let them guide you. Some people are not going to be great leaders, but they do have experiences. Ask them good questions, right? Try to figure out what makes them tick. Try to figure out if this is going to be your forever home or not. Like, there's a lot going on in your head. So try to gauge that and build those relationships with those who have been there and see how this is going to unfold for you, right? And you can't predict the future, but you can get an idea. The second thing is, don't bite off more than you can chew. And we've talked about this 100 fucking times at this point. Just try to do what you're good at for the first year, for the first 2 years. Focus on a couple things and just be really good at them. Be really good. That's how you earn your keep. And if people keep trying to show you shit, sometimes you got to learn to say no, just straight up. And that is hard because you're trying to uh, get tenured. You're trying to prove yourself as a asset in the department, but being busy versus being productive, two different things. So yeah, try to focus on what you're good at and then earn your keep that way.
Yep. I love it. Friends, if you, and I know you did, but if you found this episode helpful, do us a favor, like it, comment, share it with somebody that you know isn't watching it yet, because we're always looking to collect more friends foes, and fans. We don't care who you are. We just care that you're watching it and that hopefully we are igniting some conversations across the state. So make sure you share this with somebody that needs to hear it. And as always, we will see you next time. Bye, guys.